Deepak Ankur to the show. And thank you so much for giving your time. And, three of you have had a fascinating journey, I would say. And I've had the pleasure of being part of early stages of your journey and really trying to see how you visualized your dream and actually brought it into market, into reality. So I wanted to share your story with our viewers, and I'm sure they'll be absolutely inspired and fascinated hearing your stories. Yeah. So I will like to start with maybe Deepak. Would you want to just share with our viewers, a bit about your venture and what inspired you to really get onto this journey?
Right. Thank you so much, Rinka and Nutrify today for having me here. Uh, at Auric, we are trying to build Ayurveda for everyday lifestyle of millennials. For me, the intention of launching Auric was very much centered towards Ayurveda. Ayurveda is something that has changed my life to a good extent. Having started first with yoga and then entered into Ayurveda, I felt that Ayurveda as a need needs to be made simple, convenient, and aspirational. And that is how Auric started from my personal experience. And the Unilever experience in the back also helped me to understand about the brands and the products. So that's how I got started.
Great. Ankur, what about you? How did you get started? And tell us a little bit about your venture as well and what really inspired you, because I know you have a very, very fascinating story behind why you got into this. So why don't you share that?
Yeah, thanks, Rinka and Nutrify today for having me here. And I think the key insight, which was an aha moment for us to start andMe, which is a women's health tech platform, is is basically like 1993, which is less than 3 decades ago, is when FDA in US allowed women to participate. So when I say allowed, it's actually women were not allowed to participate in pharma clinical trials. So all the drugs, medicines which were made before were made without women in clinical studies. And that's something that just boggled my head significantly. And I was like, why is this? And coupled with the personal reason with my mom suffering from osteoporosis and anemia, and I could not figure out a point in time why this happened. I realized there is a need for having women's health product, something more lifestyle oriented, so that we can solve for very specific problem among women. And I think when I come to you, I was very clear that there needs to be a base around nutrition that we have to fulfill, because almost 70% of Indian women are calcium and iron deficient. And then on top of that, how to integrate holistic Ayurvedic solutions, herbals into it was something that we end up doing at andMe. So andMe becomes a product company for women.
No, absolutely. And I think as we go along, we'll learn a little bit more about andMe. Matt, I think I met you almost 10 years ago as a student just out of NYU and really daring to dream and come into India and start something in the space of anemia. And it was fascinating to hear that. Why don't you share about your journey and the products that you have and a little bit about what inspired you to start this journey, really?
Sure. Thanks, Rinka, and thank you, Nutrify today. Myself and Jennifer Tsai co-founded Violet Health. You're right, almost 10 years ago. The issue and kind of the thing that brought us to anemia was the fact that I was unaware of was that the majority of pregnant women in India don't have enough iron in their bodies. And what's more, the vast majority don't like to take the standard solution, which is to take iron tablets. And so once we kind of realized this, we began to do a deep process of learning and understanding what was driving pregnant women's behaviors when it comes to buying iron tablets and then taking them, whose advice were they asking, and devised a solution around that called Mamabix, which is a highly iron fortified and folic acid fortified biscuit that can replace the iron tablet.
Right. No, and I think one of the things that fascinates me from all three of you, your stories, is really the fact that when you talk about health and wellness, the most common thing to say is, yeah, fine, look at drugs, look at nutraceuticals in that space. You would always feel that food and beverages should be so closely associated with health and wellness, right? And it's a very intuitive fit, but it's an extremely difficult fit to play in the marketplace. Right. And I think all of you have probably learned this along the way, and I've managed to crack it as well. And I think that's fascinating. So can you tell a little bit about some of the products that you've done? And I think one of the ways how consumers are very convinced about the benefits of your product. Because from a drug perspective, like some of you mentioned, that a lot of clinical trials are done and so on and so forth. So how have you gone about delivering products that are truly beneficial and consumers have actually been able to validate that? Just tell us a little bit about that. Ankur, you want to go?
Yeah, cool. So Rinka, for us, I think again with you, we were able to set up a very strong base for R&D. So we know exactly what we are putting in the product, and some of the clear ideas for us was not to have any preservatives, artificial ingredients, etc. But how to take it up one level up with what functionality the product can provide, right? And so the way we have approached so far is like using a lot of research data and then bringing ingredient together and then building up that interaction study, like how is your Ayurvedic herbs interact with your minerals and vitamins, interacts with your actives that you're using to solve a functionality, right? For example, one of our key product is PCOS drink, which we have created for women having irregular periods, hormonal imbalances. And when we did a small study with the women where we send them the drinks for 2 months and ask them to report their period cycle, whether they're getting periods or not, we realized almost 83% of those women got their periods on time within a month, right? Which is huge. Some of them didn't even got periods for last 6 months to 8 months, right? So it was something which we realized is been working. Different from Matt, I didn't take the clinical route, but what we are realizing now is that that's where we want to get to bring in that extra level of credibility with product. So far, we are more referral driven, where women are talking to other women and telling that this works for me and you should take it. But we think once we have the clinicals in place and once we have people coming in and testing, more doctors and more nutraceutical industry players will also start acknowledging it.
Right. No, absolutely. And Matt, you want to talk about how you went about really proving the efficacy of your product?
Yeah, thanks. We began with a close partnership with a noted research institute, St. John's Research Center in Bangalore. And so with them, they created and executed a series of clinical studies, double-blind randomized controlled trials, to prove the efficacy and safety of our product. So for us, we began with that, and then after that finished and we had proven that, then we kind of built on that and the marketing and the messages on top of that.
Right, absolutely. And Deepak, I mean, I think, and when people talk about Ayurveda, they would say, oh yeah, it's just generally regarded as safe, and it's got history of long use and so on and so forth. People don't really talk about the effectiveness of Ayurveda. So, and you've talked about it very, very effectively. So, I mean, it would be great to hear how you've gone about it.
Right. So, Rinka, our process was very simple, that the actives present in each of the herbs are really that need standardization. So every single ingredient that goes into the formulation are standardized to a certain active level. That's the first step that we do. The second step that we do is we look at the recommended daily intakes as defined by the Ayurveda Pharmacopoeia of India. That helps us define what is the level at which a minimum or a maximum permissible limit allows you to take care of the effects that is going to come over a period of time. And then the third and the final step is what we call it a pseudo-clinical study, which is more of an in vitro study. When the same formulation is exposed to the human cells of a skin or a mind or a immunity cells, it helps us understand from the perspective of how the cells are responding to the formulation. And that gave us the confidence that over a period of time of about 25 to 35 days over a regular consumption of bottles, it is actually showing really positive results. And then at the same time, when you look at some of the Western parameters in terms of the percentage of antioxidants present in the drink, it also helps you to correlate the effects of skin radiance beverage, which is one of our highest sellers, with the antioxidant present in that beverage, which is then compared to the antioxidant present in green tea. And then we are able to look at what are the documented clinical studies of green tea. So those are the kind of three-step process that we have used so far in collaborating and bringing certain, not only the wisdom, but also science into Ayurveda.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think I personally, having come from the space of food and beverages and not so much the pharmaceutical space, for me, a consumer articulation or the anecdotal evidence coming from consumers is probably as important as clinical. I would say clinical is of course important, but at the same time, I think consumers need to speak need to really see the benefit of what you do. So I mean, Deepak, how have consumers responded to your product? Like you said, skin radiance is one of your biggest sellers. What kind of benefits are they seeing from that? What is it that they have, come back to you with? Some of the anecdotes that have come from consumers.
I think very similar to what Ankur mentioned, just like the truth of a benefit comes from the referral, the same way the truth of a product also comes from the repeat. If the consumer is coming back to you and buying the same product again and again, then that itself means that it's not merely the taste that is bringing the consumer. After all, you're not going to pay a premium for just taste, and that to a 2x or a 3x premium. You're going to pay premium for the benefits that come along with the product. So that, according to me, more than the clinicals, actually speak for the benefits that people have observed themselves. At the same time, Ayurveda is a personalized nutrition. Ayurveda is not a generalized nutrition, and therefore, to each to its own is the mantra of Ayurveda. And hence, good 60-65% of the people are able to see the benefits, and the other 30-35% are not able to see the benefits. It's not really the problem with Ayurveda or the formulation, it's just the problem with the absence of personalized nutrition. And that's how we try to tackle these two things in two separate ways, where slowly and slowly we are trying to understand the personality of the consumer in order to map why it is not working on him or her. So that's how I think is the future of nutrition if Ayurveda has to go the Western way. But at the same time, today we are looking at repeats to see the benefits that are coming to the consumer.
Right. And Matt and Ankur, I think both of you are in the space of women's health, right? And one of the things that when we were doing research in women's health area earlier on, is that women find it, first of all, very, very difficult to talk about it, right? How have you got consumers to talk about it? Maybe Matt, you want to go first, and then Ankur, what have they said about your product? Why are they having it? What is it doing for them?
Yeah, for us, it's a very functional product that we will go and have our sales team visit with doctors and explain our research and the product. And lots of times this conversation about a pregnant woman's iron deficiency anemia occurs between the doctor and her patient. And so we want to make sure that the doctor is informed about what a product is and what it can do. And our clinical studies, so that the doctor can make her best recommendation to her patient. And then the doctor can see the results in the blood results of that patient, a month later.
Right. And I've had women who've bought your product and they've said, oh, wow, I don't have to have tablets anymore. So I can enjoy it with my biscuits. So I think that is the beauty of trying to do health and, wellness solutions through food. Because it's your everyday repertoire of eating food and drinking beverages and so on. So I think that's what is amazing about these products. Ankur, what about you?
Rinka, I remember 1 year back when this entire COVID lockdown started. For me personally, like I woke up in the morning, there was a mail in my mailbox. It was a super bittersweet moment because the mail was that a woman just gave birth to twins, and they said like she was on her PCOS died for over 9 months now, and she said like I have not been able to conceive for 3 years, and I've just given so that's the kind of feedback we are getting, and it's just mind blowing. And even if the business is like looking really grim when lockdown is happening, like I was really happy. So we have been hearing these kind of feedbacks very strongly these days. A lot of women reach out. The bigger problem for us is there is still, and if you see there's still a divide between Western medicine or a Indian medicine or Ayurveda, and nobody thinks of like using them or complementing them. So it becomes a lot for us when gynecologists do not recommend us and say, no, it has Ayurvedic ingredients, I'm not going to go about it. So that's been a bigger challenge. But what we are seeing, like women who are trying are coming back and telling us because they also want to tell other women. And there is this inherent characteristic in women that they care, right? Like, I don't know whether I have ever shared that I am liking these shoes and like I'm sharing with a friend of mine that you should buy this shoe. But I see my wife doing it. Like she will always share, hey, I tried this cream and this is really good. You should try it on your skin. So that is helping significantly. And that's the reason they're able to talk to us as well, because we are actually talking about things which nobody is talking about right now to them.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. And now you've been in the market for a few years, three of you. And so what have been some of your learnings in market? What's been working well? And also what have been some of the challenges which you've managed to overcome, I'm sure, really about how have you managed to succeed so far? so what would be your mantra of success, as well as some of the challenges that you've kind of been able to, sort of cross that hurdle to be able to kind of, crack it. So yeah, why don't you go ahead? Ankur, you want to get started?
Yeah, I think like the biggest challenge is to reach out to people, right? Like being a D2C brand when you are, and through food and beverage, right? So if we started retail, we got lost in the entire retail space. Like the drink is getting set next to a bigger brand, which is not solving functionality. So the biggest learning has been how to reach out to these consumers and how to stand out such that they know that something like this exists. Like I still travel to Mumbai and find a girl in a shared cab who says she has not heard about us, right? Like it's a tier one consumer who's not yet heard about us. So that's been the biggest challenge. Biggest learning for me is that do not assume that your consumer is a tier one consumer. That's what I assume. More than 70% of our consumer are tier three, tier two, and tier three, right? Like that's a significant number. And we thought they can't pay because there's a premium to our product. But what we are seeing, like functionality trumps everything. If they are seeing benefits, they'll go and they'll pay for it. And so these are the two big ones for me.
True, absolutely. Deepak, what about you?
Ankur has already made a very valid point. That's one of the things that at Auric also we realized. Apart from that, I think both Ankur and I started on a very fascinating journey of delivering liquids to the end consumer. And liquids as a product is not very courier friendly. So the cost of doing sales is any which way is insanely high, but at the same time, the cost of delivering the product is also insanely high. And how do you balance the two things is the biggest learning that I have had in the last 2 years or so. While Ankur did mention about not many people knowing about a D2C brand at this stage, even in a tier one city, I think that is going to be a reality for a greater part of our life. But at the same time, what is also going to be important is that how can we reach that consumer again and again without incurring the cost again and again. And that for me has been the biggest challenge and the biggest learning. And that is where slowly and slowly I also realized that while liquids as a format is difficult to distribute, but it is also a format which has never been explored so much from a health and a nutrition perspective. So that gives you a very, a thin edge over multiple other products that they have seen so many other non-liquid formats that whenever a liquid format comes over a Facebook or an Instagram, so many people want to try. The trial index is really, really, really high. But how do you sustain that trial index through repeat purchases? That essentially becomes the challenge for you to sustain the lifetime value. So that for me has been the biggest learning to distribute and balance your portfolio across the liquids and the non-liquids, and also balance the demand drivers from a liquids and the non-liquid perspective.
True, absolutely. Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you've seen in the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, I guess going in, but it's such a noisy environment in the sense that there's so many messages, walking down any street, thinking about the messages on your cell phone, on billboards, on what you're receiving when you're reading your email or your apps or anything. It's very, very noisy. And it's really hard to cut through that noise in a way that's cost effective, that delivers your message kind of in a way that you want it delivered, that really lands on the consumer. And so for us, it was a lot of trying, A/B testing, understanding what messages are working, what messages aren't working. And those are difficult tests to construct in a world where you have, it's difficult to prove that message actually did land in a way and that person was a repeat consumer. So we kept going back to, the challenge for us was that typically the vast majority of pregnant women did not like the iron tablet, and we had a really good solution for that. So it was kind of going back to the problem if we were talking to, say, a woman's gynecologist or her mother-in-law or another friend that happened to have a friend who was pregnant. I think going back time and time again to what is the original problem we're trying to solve and what are we doing and what can our product do to solve it, always sort of centered us to remind us what we're doing and to kind of get our message most clearly across.
Right. No, absolutely. And I'll just leave this to any one of you to answer this, but do you think that there is somewhere for startups especially, right, some bit of lack of mentoring in these spaces? I mean, let's say, and some of you work with large companies like a Unilever and so on, or a Nestle and so on. And yeah, I mean, a lot of this would be available to you at your disposal, right? Did you find this a bit difficult in terms of really, and it's like you kind of have to learn along the way and, learn the ropes. Does that take a lot of effort? And would you really like if there were more mentors who were coming along and saying, hey, listen, I'd advise you to be able to get there, any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think Rinka, the start of our journey would have been very, very difficult if we would not have found you, right? Like the entire ecosystem that works, and it's like like it's very serious, right? Like for us, it took us 1 year to just develop the product, and after that to how to market it and how to get it to the, so like I think the lack of just lack of people who can actually tell you, at least in the entire FMCG world, especially in nutraceutical, more importantly, has been a challenge for me and personally. And I've been always looking for more mentors. I think Nutrify today has been there with like my co-founder has been talking to them for a while now, and I think like having more such channels and more people talking about this will help significantly the entire ecosystem. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's important for like-minded people to come together. And, it's not about just an investor coming in with the money and so on. It's really about mentoring to be able to get you to that right level of success. Because, you have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of startups putting up things there, but the success criteria is very low. I mean, the success percentage is very low, rather. So I think, yeah, that's totally important. And now I think all of you are, in terms of scaling up your ventures, you're taking it to a much larger scale. So what are you seeing right now as some of your challenges as you're scaling your venture? What are the areas where you feel that, help would be required, or, you need more ecosystem partnerships to be able to see how do you kind of really scale this up to a much larger venture? So just give me your thoughts around that. Anyone, if you can go. Deepak, you can go.
Sure, I'll just quickly mention. I think I like to think of a startup stage in 3 stages: 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to 100. And in the demand challenges and the growth, marketing is always going to be a challenge in all the 3 spaces. I don't think so anyone would disagree with that. I think how we can grow without burning a lot of money, that is the biggest challenge. Because if you can just throw money and grow insanely in a CPG market or in the FMCG market, it becomes a difficult proposition. And therefore, from that perspective, how can you create a virality? How can you create a referral systems in place? Those are the things that are actually of greatest interest and greatest challenges that I feel any entrepreneur, especially in a CPG business, would feel like. Some of those challenges are met through collaborations. If you're able to get a great collaboration in place, you're able to, invest that time, energy, and money into growing your business, not purely from a numbers perspective, but also from the word of mouth perspective. And that is how I would see it as a challenge, that which of those 10 trials that you're going to do is going to actually hit the nail at the right spot, which is going to lead to that virality and the cost per sale spiraling down to zero. That's where I think the biggest challenge lies, at least for me.
Right. Ankur, about you?
I think Deepak covered the 90% of the challenge that space. I think for me, the next 10% also comes from the fact that the investor ecosystem, the way it has developed in India, has always been tech driven, which requires like you scaling within the next 1 year, right? And it becomes very difficult for most investors who have never been in a D2C or an FMCG to understand that it requires time, it requires patience to grow. And I've been like, this is something which I've been seeing continuously, and I've been part of the system, and I've been facing it consistently. Like, how do you balance growth and also push back that saying that the growth will not be like 100% month on month, will be 20%, but it'll be more sustainably driven over time, right? It's not an internet business that it will just become like today is zero and tomorrow become 1,000. It will take time to become 1,000, and one needs to be patient, because both Unilever, Nestle, all of them are like 100, 200 years of journeys, right? Like it's not. Nestle started 3 years back, right? So that's something that of a challenge that I see as well in the system.
No, absolutely. I think totally agree with you. And yeah, Matt, what about you?
Yeah, no, wonderful points that you both make. Yeah, and especially difficult given COVID with both, I mean, early on COVID, supply chain disruptions was very severe. And now, as doctors, rightfully so, are focused on patients, we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's difficult to, the old model of medical reps visiting doctors and going from doctor to doctor for a lot of pharmaceutical companies has been radically disrupted. And so finding out new ways to add value to doctors, to give them information about both about COVID-19 and other new research that they may not have seen because of the additional complications and time that they're taking during the pandemic to focus on COVID-19. There's ways, I think, innovative ways that companies can think through this. Also, just growing in general from state to state and city to city has become more difficult, just given, certain places have travel restrictions. So all of which is to kind of add to the normal difficulty of building and growing a product. But that's why we're here. And this is, all of us, I think, are have very specifically defined problems that we're working on because we're passionate about it and we want to help alleviate them and make, and make this, make a more positive future for all of us. So.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that is exactly what I find so fascinating about working with, entrepreneurs like yourselves is I think the journey is hard. The journey is extremely tough. It takes, and like you said, so, you can never build a food business in like 2 years. It doesn't build. I mean, it needs time. You need consumers to change habit. It takes time. So I think that's like super critical. But I think the fact is that none of you actually, let your passion go down. And I think that is like just so amazing, that the commitment that you have and the whole thing about, and I've heard you guys refer to this many times during the conversation about, you keep going back to the question of why you started this whole journey, right? You keep going back to that. And I think that is where the entrepreneurial system is different from the large organizations where you would say, okay, fine, if this didn't work, you move on, you just move on to something else. For an entrepreneur, this is your life. This is why you started this. And this is why you need to keep coming back to your question. So I think it's amazing what you guys are doing and your commitment and passion. And I think what COVID has done has also brought about very different ways of doing things. And like, I think, Matt, you mentioned about how do you reach out to doctors? And I think this whole space of digitization, this whole space of really being able to reach out and, sort of different ways of being able to market your products and stuff like that is actually becoming quite interesting. And these are the spaces where I think we should start seeing a lot more innovation happening. So innovation is not just about products, right? It's a lot about how you reach out to your consumers, how you're going to get your repeats up, things like that. So it'll be fascinating to see how technology and products can play together to come up with some interesting solutions. Any last minute, any pieces of advice to entrepreneurs who want to get into similar spaces? And I mean, I think what you guys are trying to do is so amazing, because you're trying to do health, nutrition, wellness with food and drinks. Like I said, it's intuitive, but it's extremely hard to do. So, and something that tastes good, delivers all the health benefits, all of that. So any pieces of advice to people who want to get into this space?
I'll quickly share one. Not everything is about innovation. It's always good to just do a couple of things which others have done in exactly the same way, consistently, with the great execution. Sometimes we undervalue the power of execution. We sometimes undervalue the power of consistency, and we overvalue the power of innovation. A lot of entrepreneurs, I see they're always looking for what is meri marketing alag kya hai dusron se. It's sometimes it's just going to be the same thing that everyone has done, but probably doing it better than them, but consistently. That's what I would suggest, apart from all the innovation and all the product and all the benefits that you've spoken about.
Right. Ankur?
I think one thing that I've learned, and I think that's the most important thing I've learned, is pushback, right? People are going to question your base. They are going to challenge your base. Just push back, go back to the question that you have started the company for. Go back to the person that you have started the company for, and understand whether this question or whether this challenge is worth fighting for. and do not accept like there'll be people who will write checks to you and tell you that you shift from women's health company to a kids health company, I'm going to give you 1 crore. But just be sure that that's like you believe in what you have started and you're doing the same.
Absolutely. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, I would say, find the problem that really excites you, that you want to solve, that you'd like to spend 5, 10, 15, your entire career to solve. That's one. Two is to get in touch with you, Rinka, and bring you on board as a mentor and as an advisor. And three would be talk to Nutrify today. I think platforms like this are really important for entrepreneurs to talk to each other. There are so many common challenges that we have that, in the heat of it, you think is just your only, it's just my problem, or no one else has faced this before, but that's not true. And we could all save a lot of time and be more efficient and kind of build a greater community when we share things like this. So this has been wonderful.
Absolutely. And I think this has been my learning as well, being an entrepreneur for the last 7 years, is really about this whole space of working collaboratively, right? It's, really being able to bring a solution together as an ecosystem of, whether it's entrepreneurs, service providers, and so on. So and I think that's emerging. I think in India, it's still developing, but it's, it's moving in the right direction. So thank you so much, guys. I think it's like I just said at the beginning of the whole session that I'm sure for the viewers, it's been fascinating to hear your stories and your journey. And I think a platform like this, like Nutrify today, I think gives us the opportunity to be able to present this. And it's learnings for some people, but it's also a way of, people finding you in terms of being able to solve a problem together. So thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.